Greetings VFI supporters and anyone else watching this video. I'm Lirania L. Snyder, sitting in for my dad, Barry Siegel. The Iranian-backed Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah launched its largest barrage of rockets since April into northern Israel on Wednesday, while the IDF is heavily engaged in battles with terrorists and criminal gangs in Judea and Samaria. The battle against Hamas in the Gaza Strip also continues, and all of this is weighing heavily on domestic Israeli politics, especially the battle over next year's state budget. All that and much more is just ahead on this week's edition of VFI News from Israel. We're starting off this week's report with the news from the Northern Front, but that's only because we have to start somewhere, and the VFI News team is in agreement that Hezbollah poses the greatest military threat to Israel at the moment. That might change, especially if Iran ever gets around to launching that massive strike on Israel they've been threatening for several weeks now. So be sure to tune in every week and check the Vision for Israel website often to get the latest updates. All of that having been said, Hezbollah has kept up a pretty steady stream of rockets, UAVs, and missiles into northern Israel almost every day for the past several weeks. Some days the volume is heavier than others, and Wednesday saw a higher volume of the fire than usual, firing more than 70 projectiles into the Galilee. Most were either intercepted or landed in uninhabited areas, but a few landed in the border community of Kiryat Shmona, damaging several buildings. Other rocket impacts started fires, adding the over 11,000 acres of forested areas and agriculture fields which have burned because of fires started by incoming rockets since the war began. As we always mention in these reports, Vision for Israel is providing communities all over Israel with the tools they need to protect and defend their citizens against rockets, the fires they start and the wounds they sometimes cause. Obviously, that includes bomb safety shelters, of which we've placed dozens since this war began. But it also includes training and equipment for medical first responders, civil defense teams, volunteer firefighters, and much more. If you want to know more about how Vision for Israel is working to protect the vulnerable while training and equipping those who must put out fires and bind up wounds, you can visit our website at visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social media. This is the best way to stay informed and be in touch with us. Now, back to the news. Israel responded to the Hezbollah rocket attacks, of course, striking at Hezbollah positions all over southern Lebanon, including rocket launchers, weapons, warehouses, and firing positions. But for many people in Israel, this is not enough. Nearly 100,000 Israelis have been evacuated from their homes in the northern part of the country because of the fire coming from Hezbollah, and they've now been away from their homes and livelihoods for almost a year. The new school year, which started last Sunday, finds tens of thousands of Israeli children in temporary educational frameworks, and many of those children are still behind on their studies because of the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 crisis a few years ago. There are many strong arguments being made that this situation is simply impossible and Israel should tell Hezbollah to knock it off. If they don't, the IDF should be sent to make a major attack that would push them back at least to the northern bank of the Litani River, so they would not be able to menace the border communities and fire an endless stream of rockets into the Galilee. This would inevitably lead to tremendous damage being done to both Israel and Lebanon, and even some of Israel's closest friends and allies in Europe and urgently objecting to this idea. They're not offering any serious alternatives, but they're insisting that this idea is the wrong way to go. To be fair, there's also a great deal of debate within Israel about what to do about Hezbollah. Iran has threatened to directly attack Israel again, and more seriously this time, if Israel attacks Hezbollah. Other Shiite groups all over the Middle East, from the Houthis in Yemen to militias in Syria and Iraq, have made similar threats. Some argue that these groups will attack Israel sooner or later anyway, so we might as well fight them now while there are large American military forces in the region to help us if we need it. Others say there's no reason to force an engagement, as the situation might improve and there's no rush. Still, others say that if we do nothing, Hezbollah will continue making life impossible for the residents of the Galilee, and no sovereign nation can allow a situation like this to continue. I agree. These debates are nearly endless, but a decision has to be made. And I strongly disagree with those who say there's no rush. People need to go home, their children need to go to school, gardens and farms need to be tended to, businesses need to be restarted, and so on. The sooner, the better. Anyway, there are many other things Israelis are arguing amongst themselves about these days. As my father Barry Siegel reported earlier this week, there was an outpouring of grief and anger at the governing coalition of Benjamin Netanyahu over the issue of the hostages this week. The video my father posted to this channel on Tuesday tells the story of the raging debate over the negotiations for the release of Israel's remaining hostages that got a lot more emotional last Sunday when the bodies of 6 murdered hostages were recovered. If you missed that video, I encourage you to go back and watch it. It's unclear whether or not the protests that we had earlier this week changed any minds in the Knesset, or whether other factors might have. But as the week went by, leaks from senior officials indicated that Netanyahu's stance was softening. The issue of the IDF withdrawing from the Philadelphia corridor is still being hotly debated, and most other aspects of the American brokered deal that would see a ceasefire in exchange for the remaining Israeli hostages have been finalized, according to diplomatic sources. Reports have also emerged that by Friday, the U.S., Egypt, and Qatar, which are all acting as mediators between Israel and Hamas for the purposes of these negotiations, are going to give each side a final proposal, which will be on take-it-or-leave-it terms. If either side rejects it, negotiations will not be restarted, and the mediators say they'll wash their hands of this situation. I would like to make a comment about all of this, but candidly, I don't know what to say. This is an unprecedented situation, and there are no easy answers for anyone. I will say, however, that I am once again reminded of 1 Timothy 2:1-2, which says, "I urge then, first of all, that the petitions, prayers, and intercession and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives." Friends, a lot of people are angry, anxious, confused, and upset right now about a lot of things, and many of them are coping with it by going out into the streets and screaming at their government leaders. Although I share the frustration many others feel, I humbly submit that not much good has ever come from screaming abuse in the streets. It's a much better use of our time to pray for these people, and that's what I'm asking you to join me in doing. The government leaders in Israel, the U.S., and everywhere else you might be watching this from have a lot of big decisions to make, and they desperately need wisdom, clarity, and vision. They're not going to get the help they need by people screaming at them, but they might get it if people pray for them. On that note, there was another event this week that I believe was an answer to prayers. On Tuesday, the U.S. Justice Department announced criminal charges against Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and 5 other Hamas leaders regarding their participation in the events of October 7, 2023. The criminal complaint filed in the federal court in New York City includes 7 counts, including conspiracy to provide material support to a foreign terrorist organization, conspiracy to murder U.S. nationals, and conspiracy to use weapons of mass destruction, resulting in death. It also includes accusations that Iran and Hezbollah provided Hamas with weapons, money, and other material support in order to carry out these atrocities. 3 of the defendants named in the complaint are believed to be dead, and the others are all beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. But this move nevertheless carries significant symbolic weight. The absurd claims that Hamas didn't target civilians on October 7th, that there was no sexual assaults against women on that day, and so on, are flatly refuted by this criminal complaint, which is backed up by a mountain of evidence that is available for anyone who wants to review it, that matters for all kinds of reasons. To start with, as U.S. university students return to campus this month, protests against Israel and in support of Hamas and Hezbollah have already begun to be seen. But this criminal complaint might make some of these young students and their professors think twice about joining such protests. This is one more thing we should all be in prayer about, as many young people are having their minds poisoned against Israel, and that will have consequences long after this war is over. Another consequence of this criminal complaint could be to discourage citizens of the U.S. and other Western countries from sending money to Hamas. It might be hard to believe, but U.S. officials believe several tens of millions of dollars have been sent to Hamas by U.S. citizens in the past year, mostly in the form of cryptocurrency. In other related story, the World Health Organization has carried out a campaign to distribute polio vaccines to children in the Gaza Strip over the past week. The campaign was launched in a cooperation with Israel and Hamas, which agreed to localized ceasefires in order to ensure the safety of health workers. WHO officials said on Tuesday that the campaign was ahead of schedule and they were optimistic that it would be successful in preventing a large-scale outbreak on the disease. That's most of the news that's fit to print from Israel's northern and southern war fronts, but there's one more war front to talk about, and that's in Judea and Samaria. The IDF has launched a large-scale security sweep in the cities of Jenin and Tulkarem, north of Jerusalem, to confront the growing threat of Iranian-backed groups in those cities. A word of explanation is in order here. The Palestinian Authority is supposed to have administrative control over these cities, and the PA police are supposed to be providing security there. But the Palestinian Authority began to lose effective control there almost 2 years ago, and the situation has now deteriorated to the point where street gangs armed with weapons smuggled into Judea and Samaria by Iran have taken over the streets. Hamas is also building up its strength in these cities at the expense of the PA, but even Hamas has been unable to bring these gangs under control. The terrifying truth is that Iran is trying to set up proxy groups in Judea and Samaria to threaten Israel in the same way it supported Hamas in the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. It's bad enough that Israel has to contend with these groups on its northern and southern borders, but it would be much worse if Israel had to face this threat in its heartland. That is why the IDF is moving aggressively in Jenin and Tulkarem now in order to bring this problem under control before it gets much worse. However, there are indications that the Iranian plan is already having an effect in other Palestinian cities, with an increase in crime and terrorist activity even in Bethlehem. It must be mentioned that this rise in crime is probably related to the rise in crime in Israeli Arab communities, as well as the generally poor and rapidly deteriorating economic situation in Jordan, Judea and Samaria, and even in Israel itself. Whenever the economy gets bad, people get desperate. This creates the circumstances for terrorist groups, rogue regimes, and criminal syndicates to thrive. That's what we can see happening today. And it's a very complicated problem that the IDF won't be able to solve alone. I'll say more about that in a moment, but first I need to tell you more about the economic situation in Israel, which directly affects all these other problems we've been talking about. Yes, friends, the Israeli economy is in very bad shape and many people are going through a very difficult time. It is about to get even more difficult for many people because Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich announced on Tuesday that the state budget for 2025 must be cut by around 35 billion shekels, which is about 10 billion US dollars. Most of these proposed cuts will be made to social welfare programs that many Israelis rely upon to maintain a basic semblance of normal life. There will be many arguments in the Knesset about this in the months to come, and it remains to be seen what cuts will be made and where. But there are many indications of how bad the financial situation of many Israeli citizens has already gotten, even before the government starts cutting social welfare programs. Over the past few weeks, there have been many reports in Israeli media about how Israeli families are drowning in debt, foregoing important purchases and necessary maintenance on their homes and vehicles, and even foregoing important medical procedures and medication, simply because they can't afford it. Even the purchase of groceries have begun to be cut back by some families, and with the start of the new school year, anecdotal reports have begun to emerge that children are coming to school with little or nothing in their lunchboxes. Once again, friends, the deteriorating economic conditions in Israel are causing many problems. Here at Vision for Israel, we have been providing assistance to families and communities in distress for over 30 years, but the needs have never been greater than they are now. Please pray for us to have the resources we need to help the people of Israel in this time of trouble. And if you can do more than pray, please visit us at visionforisrael.com and click on the Projects tab. Now we're almost out of time for this report, so I want to continue the VFI News tradition of ending with some good news. The Paralympics are happening this week in Paris, and Israel's team has had great success, winning several gold, silver, and bronze medals. The athletes often dedicated their medals to the families of the Israeli hostages and IDF soldiers killed in action during this war, setting an example of communal solidarity that we can all be proud of. Until next week, friends, I'm Liraniel Snyder, and this has been another edition of VFI News from Israel.